Okay, so I'm Jordan, and so for my Pathos speech, someone who has truly inspired me is my grandmother, who actually recently just passed away. However, she lived to be 96 years old, and she got to see her 8 grandkids grow up and her 3 great-grandkids. The oldest of my cousins is about 48, and then I'm the youngest, being 20, and then I have my cousin's kids as well. Who are a little bit younger than I am. My grandmother was truly the matriarch of my family. She grew up in a tiny house in Rhode Island, being the youngest of 9, and being the princess and the baby and all that. And I think it kind of shows in her character as she grew up. She went on to be a military wife and raised 4 kids of her own, the youngest of whom was my father. So she raised my father's 3 older siblings kind of on her own. She was a military spouse, so my grandfather was serving in World War II, Vietnam, and the Korean War. But by the time my father came along, my grandfather promised to take over that homemaker model. He also continued to work. He was a professor, an English professor at Roger Williams University in Rhode Island, Roger Williams College. So my grandmother went to URI in the 1940s and graduated with a math degree. Growing up, my father my grandmother always told my father how good she was at math, how good she did in school, just being that mother trying to push her kids. She later admitted to her grandkids she wasn't as good in school, wasn't that good at math, which is more of a funny story. My dad didn't find out till my grandmother was in the hospital, but it's just kind of funny for us to share with him. So my grandmother was a housewife in the 1950s, quote unquote, but she really fit into that category at all. All those things you were expected to do, taught to do. Yeah, she did none of it. She didn't want to cook, she didn't like to bake, she didn't like to clean, and she would never submit to being told what to do. Yeah, so on the other hand, though, she never had to pump her own gas, and she was never steered away from speaking her truth and speaking her mind. And to her kids, that can be quite brutal, but to her grandkids, it meant endless and unconditional love and support. As I mentioned, my grandmother only recently just passed. She was in the hospital for about 3 months, and throughout those months, every day, so many friends and family members would come see her and send their love and say goodbye. And she said to my aunt, like, why do people keep coming? Like, I don't understand. And everyone knew the impact she made on everyone's life and how much everybody loved her and how it was so easy to feel loved by her. And everyone knew she had such a strong and unique impact on everybody in her life. My grandmother was one of the strongest and most independent women I've ever met. I never saw her as weak or incapable or unable of doing anything she needed. Growing up, surrounded by like several strong, independent women in my family, truly not only like enabled or even encouraged me, but ensured that I became that for myself, and I took on that independent nature. I don't know if you noticed, I tend to talk quite a lot. But this definitely comes from my mother's side of the family. My dad's side's very English, very reserved, very quiet. And my grandmother was truly quite reserved and quiet. And she would always tell me how much she loved to just sit and listen to me, and how she never needed to like start the conversation or really speak, and I would fill the space. And I'm in one of the final conversation with my grandmother. I just wanted to say goodbye and tell her that I loved her. And she talked to me. She says that she knew I wanted to be a lawyer, which not everyone was supportive of at first. It's kind of a touchy subject for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like lawyers, which I understand. And she told me, like, if that's truly what you want, I need you to promise to be like a good lawyer and tell the truth. And that tell the truth just kind of sticks with me, and I think it's something that I think about a lot, and that I honesty and everything is super important to me, not just in being a lawyer, but just in life. And so there's been so many ways that so many things that I've heard throughout my life that either my dad's told me or my grandmother's told me that have just resonated so like deeply into who I am. And I try really hard to live up to those expectations that she set for me, that she knew I could exceed. Thank you.